how long after Crockett made the deal with Ole did they push out Thunderbolt Patterson? Because
almost immediately.
Yeah, Ole had been using Thunderbolt, and him and Thunderbolt were like a baby-faced tag team.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the Crockett deal went down, Ole and I think Gene, who was well past his, when he should be on TV at that point, turn on Thunderbolt, and then Thunderbolt is just gone.
Yeah, well, Thunderbolt Ole booked Thunderbolt. Ole liked Thunderbolt at some level. He also realized that of all the money that Thunderbolt had drawn in the entire business in his career, probably 70% of it was in the state of Georgia. That's the one place that you could still get something out of Thunderbolt Patterson at that time, because his work always sucked. I saw him in the 70s, and it was a shits. But his promos and just his personality, especially with the black audience, got over like $1 million. So you worked around it, right? But by that point, the work was worse and he wasn't drawing either. And the promos Ole booked him because he liked him and because of his history, but also the way Thunderbolt Patterson got booked in Georgia for the last 10 years of his career was he would come to whoever was running it and threaten to go to the newspapers, talk about racial discrimination, expose the business, the whole, what was the football player's name? The goddamn goofy football player. Help me. I've gone blank. Jim Wilson. He and Jim Wilson were always together. They'll go to, and Thunderbolt had buddied up and knew all of the civic leaders and the civil rights people in town. We'll cause trouble if you don't fucking book us. That's flat out the offer that was made. And so he kept getting jobs at intermittent times in Georgia, and that was the last one. But Crockett wasn't going to put up with it, and he didn't want him to begin with. So that's where Thunderbolt went.
Hey, real quick, because I've mentioned this to you, but I don't know if you've ever actually heard it. I'm going to play you a quick promo. It's not long. This is from 1990. Ole Anderson takes over as the booker, and his first moves are to bring back Junkyard Dog, gets Paul Orndorff in, which I guess was to replace Kerry Von Erich, who decided not to come in, Mr. Wrestling 2 back on TV to be a special referee, and Thunderbolt, for the first time in 5 years, is on TBS Wrestling. This is a promo he did. This is Thunderbolt Patterson. Amazing intensity. You look at him, you're like, wow, this guy's saying something, but he says nothing. He says nothing. Listen to this and tell me what you think. This is from 1990.
Okay.
Wrestling gave me the opportunity again to keep my eyeballs on you, Ole. You have ruined folks' lives. Not talking about how you dealt with mine in the past, but in the recently, you have been getting on everybody's case. So this Sunday, if you move, I am going, if you move, this Sunday, it's time to, ooh, I'm so full, I'm full up to here. Same old. But they say it's going to be a change. There will be a change. History has already been made. Call somebody. Tell somebody. Only if you move. Just move.
Ladies and gentlemen.
So again, he says nothing.
But yeah, and part you had to look at him and look at his eyes. And you had to see him saying it. And when he was jacked up, when he was fucking built in the 70s, when he, it was something. And he didn't talk like a wrestler. He talked like a preacher in a black church. And that's why when he went with Ann Gunkel, that's one of the Thunderbolts, one of the things that kept her around as long as she was around, because that was a big deal in Georgia to have Thunderbolt Patterson in the early 70s. But there was one famous story they used to tell long after he'd left the territory, back in the 70s TBS days. They were doing the TBS show, and remember at the end of the TBS show on Saturday nights, the last 2 minutes would be an interview segment where they would kind of fill up whatever time they had left, and they'd have the group of baby faces out there or the group of heels or whatever, and they'd plug and they were running Carrollton that night. Carrollton, Georgia. It was a spot show on Saturday nights. And Ole told Thunderbolt, said, just go out, and every time we mention Carrollton, it does better. If we don't mention it, nobody comes. But if we just mention we're going to be in Carrollton, then the house is up. And a lot of times you would just hear one of the guys come out and say at the end of the show, and tonight we're in Carrollton, 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 right? The hogs are coming to Carrollton. So they tell Thunderbolt, go out and plug Carrollton, just plug Carrollton. And he's got like 45 seconds. And Soley gives the mic to him and puts the mic in front of him. And Thunderbolt, he does that thing where he wipes his face with his hand and comes over his face and he gets the expression. And then he clenches his fist in front of himself and he takes that deep breath. And then he lets it out. And then a look of anguish comes on his face. And he says, oh, if I only had time. And they go off the air. All he had to say was, tonight I'm going to be in Carrollton. But no, he did his shit for 30 seconds and then said, if I only had time.
In that If You Move promo, he says one of his, I guess the lines that people remember from Thunderbolt is, I'm full up to here.
Yeah.
Didn't only
I'm
one say,
full of it. Can't take no more.
Yeah, what are you full of?
Well, see, that's the thing is, at that point, Thunderbolt was still talking to all the people he'd been talking to for 20 years, and they knew. But for the people now on TBS that's seeing him in fucking Montana, they're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Because they didn't know. It all made sense to people who had seen Thunderbolt. He was full up to here. And going to be a change come, because I'm full. Can't you tell him I'm full? I've had it.
It's funny, we talk about 1990 and Thunderbolt, and I'll get back to Mike's question after this, but on the most recent episode of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight, Steve Beverly's on the show. Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, I should say, where we review the original broadcast of Pro Wrestling Spotlight. And they're talking about Thunderbolt being back on TBS all of a sudden. And Steve Beverly just laughs. He goes, I kind of think it's amazing. You would see Thunderbolt at all these things like the Democratic conventions, handing out flyers that Ted Turner's a racist.
Yeah.
Because he won't use them. And now all of a sudden he's back on TBS as soon as they bring him back.